So our afternoon session is four farmers talking about their operation. We're starting with Steve Larocque. Steve is a first-generation grain farmer from Three Hills, Alberta. Runs a section with a lot of pulses as part of his rotation. How I met Steve was through Jake Freestone, who was here 2 years ago from England, talking to us about cereal production. And Jake and Steve were good friends through the Newfield Scholarship organization. And Steve has spent some time overseas exploring controlled traffic farming. And he's taken a real interest in that and bringing it back to Ontario. He runs a consulting company called Beyond Agronomy, operating around 30 to 40,000 acres in central to southern Alberta. And we had quite a conversation yesterday about the plethora of our type of crops showing up in Alberta and Manitoba and stuff. And so competition continues to increase. But this whole controlled traffic thing intrigued me. And I was interested in what Steve could bring to the conversation in terms of its applicability in the Ontario cropping system. So Steve, please.
All right, here we go. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up back there. Afternoon. Yeah, I was about 6'7" in my former life. I just want to put this down so you all can see me. There we go. So yeah, well, thank you very much for the invite, Ian. I appreciate it. I'm actually an Ontarian. I grew up just south of Ottawa. I'm an import. I'm an Easterner, as they call me in Alberta. But so yeah, I moved to Alberta about 20 years ago and started farming about 10 years ago. Again, when the opportunity arose. And today I'm going to tell you about controlled traffic farming, one of the systems I've employed since 2010, and I'll tell you why we do it, the case for it. So we're going to run through some photos of scenarios that are on my farm or around my area that I see quite often. Again, back to slippage and axle loads. I'll talk about my CTF setup, some of the CTF setups for other larger scale farms in Western Canada, some of the benefits, some of the good, bad, and ugly lessons I've learned doing controlled traffic. And then I don't think there'll be time for a Q&A, but we'll do that later on. So let's begin. So I lived an hour northeast of Calgary. So it's a town called Three Hills. We have everything, every different soil type you can imagine, from soils to clays, a lot of clay soils. My own farm, it's a cracking clay soil, 2-to-1 cracking clay, so high magnesium soil, very, very sticky, but swells and contracts quite a bit. We're at 3,000 feet of elevation, and we are just about 2 hours from the Rocky Mountains. So we do get a lot of turbulent weather. It says a 12-inch average rainfall. So we either get 24 or nothing. So we average 12. So we, and that could all come in 4 days or not. So yeah, again, back to that no tilling for 10 years, just simply because that's as long as I've been farming. But I do work with growers all over the place, mainly central Alberta, southern Alberta, but I do work with some clients overseas as well. A lot of it surrounds systems approach, no-till, controlled traffic. So that's to give you a picture of the West. So really, I mean, what is controlled traffic farming? Really, it's a farming system that seeks to minimize the effects of wheel traffic damage. And we simply separate the area from we grow our crop from the area we drive our equipment. And we do that by matching axle widths and equipment widths. It's a fairly simple concept, but pretty complex to put into place. The case for CTF. So what I noticed back in 2007, I was visiting Australia. Now there's a place, we'll talk about no rain or floods. I was visiting a farm that they've gone through, I think it was 8 years of drought. 8 years of drought, and he was pulling off at that time, 15 to 20 bushel canola, while other neighboring farms weren't even harvesting. I went back in 2010, and it was an absolute flood. So they went from 8 years of drought to absolute, 16 inches of rain at harvest. Even with 16 inches of rain at harvest, he's on his tram lines, and he's taken off 1,000 ton of canola in a week. So almost $500,000 worth of canola in a week, and everybody else, once again, are stuck. He's pulling them out in the evenings, so they couldn't even get onto their land. So CTF is a very resilient system, so it helps with floods, It helps with droughts, and that's like I just said, we get 0 or 24. So really fit in my system. Now, back to the three components of soil. I mean, we've always known the chemical side, right? We've done, I'd say, a very good job of measuring the chemical side. NPKs, macros, micros, organic matter, EC, let's say. But really, we're starting to get into the biological, which is great. We're starting to look at soil health. We're looking at bacteria, fungi, how we can improve our soil health through cover crops or different crop rotations. So we're focused very much on the biological, but very few people are talking about the physical side. I liken it to the condo space. If you want your biology to thrive, you got to give them somewhere to live. Not just food, but they need porosity. They need airspace. They need a place to hang out. So that's what CTF offers. So the impact, some of the gentlemen talked about this this morning. I mean, the first pass is the worst pass, is the most damaging pass, so you can travel over it as much as you want. The first pass is the worst. Axle weights have been above 10 ton, have been shown to reduce plant available water, it says. Infiltration rates by 40%, and I'll show you some work that we've done with infiltration rates. That's just off the chart. It's really cool. Reduce earthworm numbers. You can imagine one pass. You're doing all that work to improve your biological, your soil health, and then one pass, 60% of your earthworms, bang, in that pass, gone. Increases the power required for tillage, reduces crop yield. That tends to vary depending on whether droughts or floods. And CTF adoption there's some great work in Western Canada. They're looking at nitrous oxide emissions. So they're reducing emissions by 20 to 50% in some cases. And what that means in our values is every day that soil sits saturated because it's compacted, that water is not going anywhere, it's just sitting there. We can lose, in a high nitrate environment, up to 2 to 4 pounds of nitrogen per day. So you can imagine 5 or 6 or 7 rainfall events over the growing season. All of a sudden there's 14, 20, 30 pounds of nitrogen gone. So CTF has got some great benefits to it. So we used to travel our fields a lot and under the conventional till systems. And for Western Canada, being such a drier climate, the traffic used to be 70, 80%, 5, 6, 7 passes. We moved to no-till. In fact, many no-till fields that I manage would be under no-till for just over 40 years. So they've been in no-till a long time. And so we've taken that traffic from 80 down to 45, 50%. So if you're seeding north-south one year and then east-west the next year, you're basically covering that field up to 80 or 90% with wheel traffic. Move to a controlled traffic, and we can bring down that footprint roughly to 15, 17% in many cases. So we can just concentrate that area to just 14 or 15% of our fields. So equipment footprint, this has been the biggest problem, right? Was it Scott that showed that Borgo, that they got a 100-foot Borgo air seeder with a 1,300 bushel cart? That's, what is that, 70-some-odd thousand pounds? That's just what it's carrying, never mind the equipment weight. So most of the most of the equipment coming off the line, if you look at that Challenger, 21-ton, quad track, 23-ton, the sprayers in the middle, you're looking at just about dry, they're almost 20 ton. So almost 10 tons per axle. And they're not weighted equally. John Deere's improved that. But just a few years ago, the split on the 4930s were a 60-40. So of that 22.3 ton, 60% of that weight would be on the back wheels, right? So you'd see that tremendous impact all across Western Canada, especially in the wetter years. So combines, 19, 20 ton, that S680, it's almost overloaded coming off the line. And we know that the majority of that weight is being put towards the front axles. So you load that up with 350, 400 bushels of wheat or corn, there's a lot of weight on those axles. So I'm often told that the freeze thaw will take care of most of the compaction. And you know what? It's true to a point, because what you need with the freeze thaw to undo some sort of compaction, it's going to be shallow, 2 to 5 inches maybe, and you need multiple freeze thaws. To really break that compaction apart, you need multiple freeze thaws, and that's where it happens, in the top 2 inches, which is often why that soil fluffs up and you don't necessarily notice the wheel traffic any longer come the spring. But I want you to take notice of that stubble. This is 2010 when I first started CTF. So you can see that stubble, how it waves. That stubble first year was wavy. And one of the reasons, that's a hoe drill I use, so a 30-foot Concord hoe drill. So when it comes across that landscape and it meets differing levels of soil resistance from random wheel traffic, it's jumping around. So as soon as it hits it, just slightly, inch to inch, as it meets old equipment traffic, just kind of shakes around. But fast forward to year 2, so 2011, 2012, 13. This photo is 2013. So year 1, my drill is skewing like this. Year 2, just a little bit less. Year 3, it's like a string line. And all we've done is manage our equipment, and all we've done is lowered the soil bulk density. So now our drill, our hoe drill, just like a rake through a sand trap. And this is heavy clay soil. This is 30% magnesium, heavy clay soil, like sticky, nasty stuff. So I often get told that sandy soils don't compact either. So that's a fallacy. Here's a great photo. Back to the drones, like drone imagery, 1 meter resolution is fantastic for picking up wheel traffic. And I never married the two. That we've got telemetry now. We can match that equipment traffic data with NDVI data. This is a photo, 1 meter resolution NDVI photo taken in canola in July, early July. And you can see these tracks all the way along, these red tracks. Well, this is a 2010 image. The last time he combined or harvested on a diagonal because his wheat went flat on a wet year. This is like a 1% organic matter, sandy soil type. And 3 years after the harvest event, you still see that equipment damage. Once you pack sand, that's why we build patios and patio stones and pavers and roads on them. I mean, you wet it, you tamp it, you leave it. And that's exactly what happened with that equipment traffic. So long-lasting effects on sandy soils because sand doesn't expand and contract. Clays do. But here we have harvest traffic on potatoes. So this ground was in potatoes last year. You can see where the buggies were going to take potatoes off the field. So even in spite of all that soil disturbance, it's still showing up the year after. Slippage, we talked about that, right? Where's the balance? I learned a lot this morning about slippage and soil shear and why the recommended rates are 10 to 20%. I mean, I think I'll give up a little bit of fuel consumption or fuel efficiency to avoid slippage. So when you look at recommended settings be 7 to 10% slip, oftentimes people are running over that, 10, 15, 20 in some areas. So the tracks, yes, tracks will minimize that, but slippage is often what I see in our heavy clay soils, because in a no-till situation, the ground is typically wet. The snow melts. We've got lots of residue. There's lots of surface moisture. So all of a sudden, if you're pulling heavy equipment, especially on any sort of incline, all of a sudden those wheels are slipping and just grinding that soil, locking that soil into place. So at 2-3 inches, you'll see that. You'll often see that where that soil is hard as a rock in that 2 to 3 inch depth. And a lot of that's from slippage. I'm also told that high organic matter soils, they create a buffer, right? This is a 7 to 8% organic matter soil, and it's a beautiful loam. Excuse me. It's a beautiful loamy soil type, and in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a nice fluffy structure. It's like potting soil, but you go beneath that, and it's platy. It's like a platy rock down below, so it just bricks. So there's a bit of clay content, not a whole lot, a lot of loam in there, and even it is seeing a lot of compaction. Deep ripping, is that the solution? So we often get told that, well, I'll deep rip it. Well, for us, it's about $100 an acre to go deep rip. And I say, why create the problem in the first place, right? So for $100 an acre, I'm sorry about the funny looking Aussie here, but this is a sandy soil type. And see this photo, you can see that horizontal root growth. There's a lot of compaction in this field. This field was deep ripped 4 years earlier. So within 4 years, he went right back to where he started. Because back to that, almost 50% of our field is trafficked every year. So within 4 years, he's covered that entire field almost twice. So this is what we end up with on a sandy soil. Clay soil. So this is my place. These two photos were taken 20 to 30 feet apart. That soil on the right, that's my headland. That's where I do all my turning. All my traffic is coming around on my headland. And I need to figure out how I manage traffic differently on my headland now. But you can see high magnesium soil, so it's really dense, very low porosity. This is 5 years of CTF. Look at the aggregate stability there. Look at the porosity inside that soil. that thing is going to hold together no matter what kind of rainfall I get. And that's one of the biggest changes. If we get those big 3-inch events, 4-inch events, all of a sudden that rainfall just goes right into the soil, stores it down below where I can access it later on in the growing season. And it doesn't choke out my crop. Tram lines. How's that for cracking clay soil? So those are my tram lines, and look at the cracks down there. Those things, I don't know how deep they are, but you can lose tools in them for sure. So, trust me. So you'll see here on wheat and some barley here, I used to see those all across my fields. So in some cases just as severe, but there's all that cracking all across the field before. Now the only place my soil cracks are in the tram lines, right? So I've taken away that compaction, taken away that wheel traffic effect, and all of a sudden just these areas that start to split. Now if you think back to in those cases where we get really hot weather in late July, early August when our wheat or barley is starting to finish, all of a sudden if you get a week of really hot weather, so hot, windy, dry, all of a sudden that crop just turns really, really fast. So think of these soils when they're drying out, they're cracking, right? They're just tearing apart. If you're a root system and you're just starving for moisture and trying to pull up as much as you can, all of a sudden down below, you've got all these micro fractures, all this micro tearing going on, and that crop just goes south. We don't see that any longer. We've had hot, dry finishes, and our crops have finished really, really fat, really, really well. And inversely, in really wet weather, 2016 was a good example, where we had 12 inches of rain, the majority of that the last 50 days in the growing season, and a lot of crops just finished because there was just too much moisture, too wet. Those crops just matured really fast. They just turned almost yellow in some cases. Whereas we finished well. We just that crop sailed along until it was fully mature, and again we were 15 to 20 bushels on canola this year over the area average. It was big, big, big. But how do you put a number to that, right? Everybody else's agronomy, everybody else's management is different. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of really great changes. Caster wheels. We talk about tire pressure. We talk about load. I mean, if you look at the soil up on the top right, you can see. Look at the porosity in that soil. This is 3%. This is some of our worst land. It's still 3% organic matter. But look at the porosity inside there after 4 years of CTF. Look at this dense soil to the left. These are 12 inches apart. Taken 12 inches apart, and the only difference is that caster wheel right there. How much weight can that caster wheel possibly have when all the openers are in the ground carrying that weight? So really, you see that, you see that caster wheel. It's inflated to 30 psi, yet it's doing that, and that used to be my soil. So it's only until you stop driving over it that you actually realize how bad that equipment traffic really is, or how much effect it really has on your soil. Random versus CTF. So again, back to my headland. So I have a liquid starter, so a liquid FOSS I put in with a seed, little starter kit, and I have a 3-ton Mac that I've got the fertilizer tank on. And you can see I'm on the headland here, just threw down my ball cap. So very little impression, right? So you'd think, well, wheel traffic isn't doing a whole lot to my field because I don't see any footprints. Well, I went into the field 20 feet away. So you can see the tractor tire right there. I'm now beside it. I sunk down 7 inches. So this is 7 years of CTF. And if I go off my tram lines, I can in some areas sink down to 7 inches. So the porosity inside that soil, the ability for it to hold moisture, drain moisture. I'll show you some bulk densities and some porosity levels, and you'll be surprised at what we can achieve when we just manage our traffic differently. So this is what happens when you hire a custom app guy. And you can imagine he was cussing that GPS, eh? Come on. So yeah, he turned around and he was off. So that was at 3-leaf, as in that's when those wheel tracks occurred. So the wheat was 3-leaf stage, and it was wet, and I think I was busy, so I hired my neighbor to do some custom spraying for me, and he just slipped off my wheel tracks. And look at that. You could still see it today. So what is nature telling us? Now you look at that. This is a neighbor of mine. So just down the road, you can see he's got cattle. Well, guess what they're doing? A bit of controlled traffic there, don't you think? they follow the path of least resistance. So back to fuel consumption, back to efficiency. If the animals are telling us something, let's go to my tram lines. Those are antelope. Can you believe? I got antelope. I got a resident herd of antelope, and they too follow the tram lines. Now I've got a sign saying if they jump off, I'm going to shoot them. So they do listen. So they're a bugger on peas. Man, they love peas. But anyhow, so even the animals are telling me that I've got a system worth pursuing. So equipment setups. There's a lot of different configurations, but for the most part, given the scale in Western Canada, I mean, you talk about 120-foot planters. I mean, we've got many 60-foot, 70-foot, 80-foot drills out there, and the air carts for the seed and fertilizer, they're anywhere from 500 to 800 bushels on average. So they're pretty large. So through controlled traffic, we've been able to bring our footprint down to about 15%. Here's an example. This gentleman's out by Manitoba, and he's got an MT865. That's the one on the top right that you can see, and he's got that to 132-inch centers. So the majority of the wheel spacing would be, or axle spacing, would be 120 inches to 132. 132 is going to give you a little more stability and allow you to change your concaves for a guy like me with a 9750. I mean, you go to 120-inch centers and you got to spin your tires around and bring the cups in. It doesn't leave you a lot of room in between the frame and the tire. But again, 120-inch or 132-inch are the most common because off just OEMs you can pull them off and beyond those centers. You don't have to do any modifications. And with the MT865, these you can get spacers and bring them out to 132 or 136. So here's an 800 bushel cart, seed hawk drill. This is an 80-foot drill. So he's got an 80-foot drill, 120-foot boom, and a 40-foot header. So multiples of 40 work quite well. And you can imagine there's 60,000 pounds of product in there, not the tractor, not the air cart itself, but 50,000 pounds. So these things are carrying a tremendous amount of weight, and that's the majority for Western Canada. We're all pretty much scaled up, so the equipment's pretty heavy, and there's a lot of impact. So choosing a CTF configuration, you have to start with your combine. You have to start with your combine because first things first, you grab your measuring tape. Your measuring tape is your best friend, and measure 3 times, cut once. Because a 30-foot header, like a 630D John Deere, is 30 feet. But when I started out, my 400 Alice Gleaner header, that 30-foot header was actually 29.8 inches. So we had 2 inches of room on either side. And in some cases, you can leave soldier courses, soldier rows, and miss those rows if you don't do your measuring properly. So you really have to match your drill width with your header width. You start there. Second up is what can you spread properly or evenly, year after year. And some years, with the wind, sometimes you can, it's not the end of the world, but you can't repeatedly, year after year, spread residue on 2/3 of the width because you're going to change the nutrient cycling, the water cycling inside those areas. So very crucial to keep your residue spread to match the header width. And typically we're 2-to-1. So 60-foot drill, 120-foot boom quite often, 40-foot headers, or 30-foot in that case. So examples, the 70-foot drill, 105-foot boom. You grab a 100-foot boom like a John Deere or whatever, 100-foot boom, and you put extensions on them to bring them out to 105 and 35-foot header. So my setup. Okay, first generation farmer. When you move to CTF, you have to make a choice. A, do you upgrade your tractor or do you buy RTK? That was the choice. So I bought the RTK for $25,000 and worked with what I have. Look at this thing on the left-hand side. Is that not a beauty? Have you ever seen this thing before? Has anyone seen a photo of this? This is my pride and joy right here. So I'll tell you a story. I bought this thing for $7,000. It had 8 wheels at the time, but there is something in the transmission. It's an automatic. Something in the transmission that wasn't working. It was like a 30-cent switch. $7,000 I had myself a 4-wheel drive tractor. Well, the following year I dropped a lifter, took out 2 pistons, and $23,000 motor job later, I got myself a $30,000 tractor. So, but it's got a really nice 3406 cat engine in there now. So we're so there's some value there. that we can work with if we want to trade that off. But so what we did, instead of upgrading our tractor, we moved to 121-inch centers, and we did that by taking out the spacers, cutting the wheel nuts, and sucking it together and welding it, a really big bead, and with those two rims together. I'll show you in a second. But and it took 3,000 acres before we saw any sort of cracking, which is pretty impressive. But you should see the weld on there. But so 60-foot boom. We did have a 90-foot pull type, but these little spray coops are fantastic and they're cheap, relatively speaking. So nice light footprint on them. You can get anywhere, direct drive, shaft driven. So it's pretty simple. Got a 9750 John Deere with a 30-foot 930D header, and newest to the fleet a couple of years ago was a 60-foot side dress toolbar. That's a fast 8100. It's got an 1,800 gallon tank. So I'm now side dressing my nitrogen. So I took that from you corn guys and the cotton guys. If you can side dress nitrogen in corn or cotton, well, I said, well, why can't we do that in Western Canada? Why can't we do that for wheat or canola or whatever we need to? Because our biggest limiting factor is rain. We can lay that nitrogen out there in a high residue environment. It's just going to get immobilized. So all of a sudden, if we can go in there and inject it into the ground, there's usually subsurface moisture, so it gets into the plant right away. So converting it, there you go. There's just a close-up of what we had to do. I don't really recommend it. I mean, we did it because nobody did it. I think I saw one photo from Australia where a gentleman put an old Panther on singles, so we thought, oh, why wouldn't we? So we did, and it's been working quite well. Still had the bias ply tires. Again, I mean, for $8,000 a wheel, I mean, 4 wheels are worth more than the tractor. So I left the bias ply on there. In a perfect world, I'd move to tracks because of the nice flat footprint, not necessarily for less slippage or less footprint. It's more about creating a flat tram line pattern versus the bias ply, which tend to push out soil, especially on my clays. So here's the thing in a no-till situation. The top left, that is my offset hitch. So we had to get a bit fancy with our hitch. And I'll show you another photo in a second. But when you're running in a no-till situation, you want to keep your equipment on the tram lines, right? So you want to keep your tractor stationary. You want to keep your air cart stationary. But if you don't move your drill side to side, you're going to run into last year's stubble and make an absolute mess. So we move our side shift, our toolbar, 2 inches to either way each year. Meaning, so year 1, I'll start from center. Year 2, I'll move 2 inches over to here. Year 3, I'll jump to the left of my first year stubble. And by year 4, I'm back on that row, and there's nothing left. There's no residue to get in the way. And you can see right here, I mean, look at the stubble. The stubble's hitting the undercarriage of my toolbar. It's crazy. 16-inch stubble. This is 75 bushel spring wheat, and there's barely any residue on the ground to cause me any grief in the spring. And I've got all the benefits of keeping that standing stubble to slow wind down, create these little microclimates inside. But here's my liquid kit I've got on the hitch. I don't fill it up all the way, just I don't want to skew any depth. But next, converting. Yeah, so there you go. That's sorry about the rough cut there. We're not totally professional, but you can see the offset hitch where we just pull from center with that last hitch I showed you, and then this is our little hockey stick where we flip side to side. That enables the drill to move side to side. But if you're going to do it to the hitch at the front, you're going to have to do it to the hitch at the back with your air cart that pulls the air cart. So we just switch it year to year from side to side, and this is what we end up with. So we can run everything down those tram lines. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. So this is the good. What's really impressive is not the 35-year-old combines in the photo, but so this is 2010. I'm here with R2K Auto Steer, so everything's happy. That is my father-in-law with nothing. No auto steer, nothing. I'm cutting little patterns out for him, and the rain was coming, and we wanted to get harvest done, so we brought the old N7 out of retirement, and he's reeling that thing at 5 miles an hour, chewing up 70 bushel wheat, and doing it freehand. So he's got 1 inch and 2 inches, and he's doing a tremendous job. So that's the good part. Then there's the ugly part about gleaners and their ability or inability to spread chaff. So what I said about nutrient cycling, yeah, you really want to get your residue spread even. That's chaff and straw. Straw not as bad, but chaff, it really changes. There's a lot of nutrition in that chaff, and it breaks down quickly. So when those microbes really start to start chewing it up and releasing the nutrients, you can really see that. And look at the delay. I've got about a 2-week delay in maturity on that barley. So that was 2012. So 2013, I moved to that John Deere, and that situation erased. So still not great. Again, this is 3 years down the road. This is field again, same field. Now in barley, I've corrected that residue issue, but now I've got tramline issues because they're too deep, right? I've got a hoe drill. It's a Concord air drill, so it doesn't have on-road depth control. You have to have on-road depth control if you want to do CTF, simply because you're not evening out the field. So you will see some ridging from soils as they expand, or nutrient loads. So you need something with variable depth control, and especially if you can adjust them so you can be just at the side of your tram lines. So with my hoe drill, I can't move the shanks. I can't control that. So sometimes they're too deep. Sometimes they're too shallow, depending on the side of the tram line. So we've moved to we've got a conserver pack drill, so it's got on-road depth control. So we'll solve that problem now. The ugly. So erosion. You can imagine if you pack a runway and you have any sort of incline, this particular area, thankfully it's a very small area, and the only reason it's pounded out is because there's a field behind it we need to get access to. So at harvest, we're coming out of there and we're always pounding that traffic lane all harvest. So when you eliminate residue and you've got cement there, so speed and water kills, and that's what will end up happening is you'll see that erosion. So you have to have residue cover. So residue cover, what it does is just create little dams. If you've ever seen sticks or trees or whatever run down a ditch, they'll pile up, they'll stop, and then water come over, and they'll take more residue, pile it up, so it slows that water down. So without residue, you're at a serious disadvantage. Now the benefits. There have been a lot of benefits that we found outside of like simply removing that wheel traffic or concentrating that wheel traffic. There's a lot of side benefits that we realized that we really weren't expecting in the first place. So we'll start off with, I trust this. Oh, is that not videos? Is there a video there? No video? Oh, you're kidding. That was a really sexy video. So I want you to imagine for a second that this 30-year-old, this thing has 60,000 acres on it. I bought it from a Hutterite colony, and I redid the bushings and the pins, and it's all good. But this old drill, dang that video, that drill can seam through and seed canola right beside or whatever crop, right beside last year's row. So we can park it right between last year's row. We can leave 16-inch tall wheat stubble. Now, who here would be brave enough to leave their stubble at 16 inches tall? Yeah, no hands. Oh, yeah. Yeah, one hand. So, but what we're able to achieve, like, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but this is what we're able to achieve now. We've got a 30-year-old drill. We've got like over 60,000 acres on it. I mean, this is not a precision piece of equipment, but we're using it precisely. So now that we've changed the bulk density of our soils, and again, back to that rake through a sand trap, it glides through that soil so beautifully, and that soil flows right around. And originally, we were going to do an offset hitch that hit the center, 10 minutes. Perfect. So we used to seed right here, right in between the rows. But you know what? That's no man's land. If you don't have a lot of residue there, that's the driest area. If you want to tuck your seeds anywhere, you put them right beside last year's row. Because even on the driest spring, where's your moisture? It's in your root ball. You pull out that stubble, that's where the moisture is. So if that's where the moisture is, that's where my last year's starter fertilizer is. So I'm getting tapped into my starter fertilizer, my moisture. So all that goodness that's saving me $20 an acre in canola seed. It's usually about $60 an acre for canola seed. That's saving me $20 because I get improved emergence just by doing CTF, just by changing my bulk density. Uniformity, that's my canola growing in 16-inch tall stubble. That field was it was mid-60s for canola, which is an incredible yield, especially for our area. So what we found is more uniformity. So we get better germination, better uniformity, and there's plenty of research in Western Canada to show that uniformity can increase your yield up to 30% just by having uniformly placed canola seed. Row loading. This is a concept I brought out of Australia. So it's very same concept as fence row farming. So we're loading up that stubble row with all that nutrition, all that starter fertilizer. Then I'm planting right beside it the following year, and then to the left of it the following year. So all that nutrition is stored inside of that, that 3 or 6 inch band versus randomly across the field. So if we want to super concentrate phosphorus or potassium, we can do that right in that stubble row. Root exploration. I love this photo because this is what every magic dust salesman will show you, right? They don't show you yield data. They show you, look at the roots, look at the flag leaf. But in this case, I'm going to show you my roots. But sorry, being inappropriate there. But this is your typical random traffic next door. Great big Bordeaux drill, great farmers. But this is what you'll find in that heavy clay is that just that thin, those thin canola stems where our root exploration is just like a web. And then we can pull our canola out of the ground and not even snap a root. So what does that relate to? Nutrient uptake. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but here's no traffic. Here you can see the nutrient uptake. This is wheat taking a tissue sample at flag leaf. You can see the increase in nutrient uptake of all these nutrients compared to 12 inches away. So just 12 inches apart, flag leaf to flag leaves and wheat. And what do we see the most of? The biggest depression is phosphorus, which makes sense. The roots have to come in contact with diffusion. So this is just on the inside of my tram line. So it's not heavy, but it's definitely inside of some packed soil, and it's impacting the nutrient uptake. So we're really changing things just by controlling our traffic. Water infiltration, you can see this is a great test to do. 8-inch steel ring, about 10 inches deep. Pound that into the soil about 4 inches and grab some white water-based paint. Water-based paint, and then leave it for a day. And then go dig it out. If you got a trackhoe, fantastic. If you got a shovel, if you have to, but just dig down 3 feet and just see where that moisture is flowing. It'll tell you a lot because look at the right-hand side. That's 3 sprayer tracks. So it's just seen 3 sprayer tracks in that tram line, nothing else. And look where the moisture is. It's just holding in that top 4 or 5 inches. So what does that mean? We've done random traffic to CTF comparisons. We try to do the best we can by simulating random traffic inside of our plots. And what you'll see is this is me down here. So this is the time it takes to drain 1 inch of water. So again, that 8-inch ring with a peanut butter jar full of water. You throw it in the ring and you time it. So we're down to 6 seconds versus almost 150. So I've been in CTF the longest. This guy just started. He's almost up to 250 seconds to drain 1 inch of water. We continued this on, threw in another inch, 27 seconds. Threw in another inch, 50 some odd seconds. Threw in another inch, a minute 10. So all of a sudden we're pounding 4, 5, 6 inches of rain, and it's draining it in under a couple minutes. So how is that possible? I'll just want to show you the porosity here. If you look at this, so here's a check where we've got random traffic checks compared to CTF. Again, with the cooperator sites. And look where my porosity is. So I'm at 68, almost 70% porosity in the top 6 inches. 70% airspace inside my top 6 inches. And all the way down to 3 feet. 3 feet, I'm at 55% porosity, which is where most people are in their top 6. That's where I'm at 3 feet. So, and I've been in CTF, again, the longest compared to these guys. So big changes. Weeds. Great story here, real quick. This gentleman was on his tram lines, 12 years in CTF. The son was driving the sprayer. Girlfriend showed up with lunch. So he jumped off the tram lines and went to the approach to get lunch. And the only place he's got wild oats in that field is exactly where that John Deere sprayer, that sprayer went. Fast forward to my tram lines. Look at this. The only thing growing after harvest are in the tram lines. Seed to soil contact, right? Just like this footprint right here. Perfect. This is ryegrass. Seed to soil contact. It's why we have press wheels. So if you stop driving over them, they stop germinating. I'll share tomorrow some research data on the type of weeds and weed germination across my farm and the changes we've seen. So tram lines versus random versus CTF. So this gentleman, 16, 18 inches of rain, huge, heavy, this is a hailed out crop. He's cruising on his tram lines. So you talk about timeliness, he can get out there really quick, even after heavy rains, and harvest that wheat. He jumped out 40 feet away. So this is the random traffic versus CTF comparison side by side. He goes 40 feet away and absolutely buries that combine. The only difference is CTF for 3 years. So he's got nice little tram lines here that allow him to get on that field a lot quicker than most. So back to that, I do actually have a video that looks like it's going to work, which is great. Oh, okay. Fantastic. See? So look at that. It's just a short clip, but you can see we're leaving that stubble standing at 16 inches, and we're able to take that old prehistoric drill and move it in between that stubble seamlessly. Now it's 12-inch spacing, so there's some room in there, right? It's not 7. But we've definitely got some room there. Oh, okay. So the other video is not there. Fair enough. But so that side dress toolbar that I was really excited about, so you're not going to see it today. But tomorrow we'll get it set up. So yeah, so I'm able to side dress nitrogen anywhere from GS30 all the way to flowering. So I can side dress nitrogen in flowering wheat and gain proteins. If you see at the bottom, almost 2% protein bumps on wheat just by applying nitrogen later in the season. And we've seen big jumps in yield when you're set up for a good year and you've only applied, let's say, 90 or 100 pounds in. You can go in and smack it with another 60 and get it into the ground where the plant can utilize it. So pretty big there. Side dress versus streaming. Again, back to that high residue environment. I apply UAN to my soil. All of a sudden, those microbes tie it up, and they'll give it back at some point, but it could be too late by then. So in this case, I compared streaming on nitrogen to side dressing nitrogen and then canola, and I saw a $75 an acre increase. So 14% is what it was. So same amount of nitrogen for both, and we had just about 7/10 of rain the day after. It was best case scenario for liquid urea, or pardon me, for UAN, and we still saw that kind of increase, and you can just see it in the map there. So precision spraying, so if we're out there, just to finish up, but when we're out there side dressing, I'm now setting up call it a row sprayer. So again, this might be handy for corn, but if we're out there on canola with wider row spacing, if we're out there side dressing nitrogen, we may be applying some either micronutrients or biologicals or foliar fungicides. Why cover 100% of the ground with a foliar fungicide when I've got 40% or 50% of my field just soil and residue? So why waste that? Why waste those inputs? And I'll put them right where we need them. So again, back, do we make any money? Is there any yield increases? And it was interesting, I heard this morning that you found 5 to 8% or 7% yield increases with your data, if I'm not mistaken, and that's what we're seeing. Just after 3 years or 4 years in some cases, year one we started looking at it, we didn't see much difference in year 1, year 2, but by year 3 we started seeing significant differences. And now we've got 3 cooperators inside of our trials that are showing significant differences in yield, and a lot of times it's adding up to $20, $30, $35 an acre. So in conclusion, just look at your equipment footprint. I mean, after today, I think we'll all be taking a look at axle loads and PSI, ground pressure. Focus on the physical. Everyone talks about the chemical, NPKs. People talk about biologicals with cover crops, like they're going to solve a lot, and the cover crops are can be a big part of the system, but really, if you're limited by your structure, you can add all the biology you want, but if you don't have a home for them, it'll struggle. So CTF has multiple benefits. Like I said, we can side dress. Just by creating really straight rows, we can do a lot of really precise things with really old equipment, which is great because I don't have to go up and upgrade to a $450,000 sprayer. I can just use a small one. So CTF, it really is the ultimate precision platform. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much. And we'll do questions later. Thanks.